London, October the 5th, 1973. Shortly after midnight, the phone rings in the home of W. Ashraf, an Israeli case officer handling an Egyptian spy they simply called the Source. It is the Source himself. His message is simple: I need to meet the boss, urgently. Within minutes, Ashraf has called Tel Aviv to wake his superior, Zvi Zamir, director of Israel's intelligence service, Mossad. In just a few hours, Zamir is heading for the British capital. Later, in one of Mossad's London safe houses, Zamir meets the Source. The information he hears is astonishing. But what makes it all the more important is the identity of the man delivering it.
Ashraf Marwan was one of the best spies in espionage history. He was the perfect spy. He was not only clever and very, very efficient, but he was also very close to the information. He was a relative of Nasser. He was the right-hand man of President Sadat.
So, when Marwan told Zamir that the following day, at 1800 hours, Egypt and Syria would launch an attack on Israel, there was every reason to believe him. But was this a genuine leak from the very center of Egyptian power? Or was the Source operating under orders, giving information designed to deceive?
لا يمكن أن تذهب شخصية مثل أشرف مروان بدون توجيهات من جهاز المخابرات العامة وبدون توجيهات من القيادة السياسية. إن ما كانش من المخابرات العامة يبقى من القيادة السياسية الرئيس السادات نفسه.
Hours, Saturday, 6th of October, 1973. The holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Egypt and Syria launch an all-out war against Israel. The target, liberating the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights, territories occupied by Israel 6 years earlier in the Six-Day War. Israel is completely unprepared, its regular army outnumbered, its reservists not yet present on either front.
So the question is, how did Israel, which scored such a spectacular victory just 6 years before in the Six-Day War, permit itself to get into this situation of disaster? The answer is the Six-Day War, which, because of the spectacular nature of the victory, Israel couldn't avoid arrogance, hubris.
That lightning victory brought with it an illusion of invulnerability. Israel seemed secure behind a protective military curtain. And despite intelligence warnings during September 1973 of an upcoming Arab attack, the head of Amman, Israel's military intelligence, General Eli Zaira, was convinced there was nothing to worry about. Sadat's close relationship with the Soviets guaranteed a supply of military hardware. But the Israelis knew he had been unable to obtain the latest generation of offensive weapons. Without them, Israel's military might outweighed Egypt in the balance. But ever since the humiliation of the Six-Day War, Egyptians had burned to see their country fight back.
يا سيدي كان في إحساس فظيع بالأزمة وبالهزيمة قبل، كان في قلق، كان في اضطرابات، يعني وصلت إلى حد التظاهرات واحتلال ميدان التحرير، وكانت الرغبة في القتال، وكان في اتهامات للنظام بالتقاعس، والحقيقة السادات ده اتبهدل.
While people in the streets agitated for war, the most powerful constituency of all, Egypt's more than million-strong army was desperate to show that it could fight and win against the Israeli enemy they had to look at every day, just 200 meters across the Suez Canal.
العلم الإسرائيلي مهما أحكي ومهما أوصف، وده شعور يعرفوا كل جيل اللي كانوا موجودين، على 167 كيلو. العلم الإسرائيلي كل كيلومتر تلاقي العلم مرفوع قدامك بطول القناة. كاد أن أقسم لك جعل من قناة السويس لونها كان لون أسود، أنا كنت أشوفها أسود طول سنوات الحجاف دول، أشوفها لون أسود، وأشوف الصحراء قدامي لونها يتدرج من الأسود للرمادي، بس هذا اللون الكئيب.
With outdated weapons and lacking the ability to liberate the whole of Sinai in a military operation, in February 1971, less than 4 months after taking power, Sadat offered a peace deal if the Israelis would withdraw from Sinai. Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir rebuffed the offer.
Why should I believe now, after this experience, that anybody, under any circumstances, can assure us of something more tangible now than we had in the past?
For Israel then to give up the Sinai would have probably been an impractical thing to achieve. Unfortunately, sometimes it really does take a military offensive to change perceptions and negotiating postures.
So war it had to be. But Sadat had a bold idea in mind. Could a limited war bring the attention of the world's superpowers back to the region and jumpstart stalled peace initiatives? It was a plan developed by his chief of staff, Saad al-Shazli.
ايه اللي نقدر نقوم به في حدود امكانياتنا؟ نعبر قناة السويس بالقوات المشاة ونتوقف على 10-15 كيلو ونحرك الدفاع الجوي بتاعنا إلى حافة القناة الغربية أو غربها ب5 كيلو، ودي بتدينا مظلة 15 كيلو، وبهذه المنطقة أتوقف حتى لو انسحب العدو قدامي. طب ليه؟ العدو قدامه خيارين، إما أن يهاجم بالمواجهة وفي هذه الحالة أحدث فيه خسائر كبيرة، أو يتوقف نتيجة الخسائر الكثيرة.
As he contemplated a limited war, Sadat found an ally. Hafez al-Assad had come to power in Syria in 1970 through a coup d'etat. He too had points to prove to his people.
لا يجب أن ننسى على أن الرئيس حافظ الأسد في هزيمة 67 كان وزيراً للدفاع، وقد حمل مسؤولية كبيرة، لأنه لا يمكن فصل تبرئة وزير الدفاع عن تلك الهزيمة التي حصلت للجيش السوري. لذلك من اليوم الأول لاستلام حافظ الأسد السلطة في سوريا بدأ بتبرئة نفسه من مسؤولية هزيمة 67، وبدأ بتحضير وتجهيز الجيش السوري إلى معركة مقبلة. متى؟ لا أحد يعرف.
In a series of meetings throughout 1973, Sadat and Assad refined the war plan. It was given the codename Bedr, after the Prophet Muhammad's first victorious battle against the non-believers. When they met in Syria in late August, an auspicious date was chosen. On the 6th of October, the 10th day of Ramadan, the Muslim holy month, the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur, Egypt and Syria would launch a surprise attack against Israel. But first, a setback in the air unintentionally served to disguise their build-up and confuse the enemy. On the 13th of September, Israeli and Syrian jets clashed over the Mediterranean. the dogfight ended with the Syrians losing 13 aircraft, the Israelis only 1.
ואחר כך כשהמערך התחיל להצטבר, חשבנו שלדעתם מגיע לנו איזה מכה בתור נקמה.
As Syrian troop concentrations in the Golan grew, to the south on the Suez Canal, there were clear signs of something similar.
המצרי הולך ומתעצם, מתרגל בסדרי גודל עצומים, וכמ"פ אני לא יושב בנקודה אחת במוצב, אלא אני נוסע לו 20 קילומטר בדרום התעלה. אותי זה מדאיג, גם קציני המודיעין שנמצאים במוצבים אחרים אומרים לנו, אותנו לימדו שזה הכנות למלחמה, מה שאנחנו רואים. ואנחנו מדווחים לאחור ואומרים לנו, אל תדאגו, זה תרגיל של הצבא המצרי.
Only 5 months previously, the Israelis had responded quickly to a similar build-up. They'd mobilized their reserves, only to find that the Egyptians had gone no further than the edge of the Suez Canal. This time, Amman, Israel's military intelligence, was determined not to make the same costly mistake.
In a document that Amman published at noon of October 5th, it was a perfect description of the Egyptian army ready to go to war. The bottom line was, we nevertheless believe that there is no change in the Egyptian estimate regarding the balance of forces with the IDF, and therefore the likelihood for war is low.
But all that was about to change. That same night in London, Ashraf Marwan, Gamal Abdel Nasser's son-in-law and Sadat's information secretary, would tell Israel's intelligence chief that the attack would begin at 1800 hours the next day. At 0800 hours on the 6th of October, the Israeli cabinet met in emergency session. Instead of attending Yom Kippur prayers to ask forgiveness for their sins, they had been summoned by the threat of imminent war.
There was an argument that broke up in the leadership of Israel whether to mobilize the whole reserves or not. The Minister of Defense was at the time Moshe Dayan. His points were the following. If Israel will mobilize her reserves, then Egypt and Syria may claim that it is Israel that intends to attack them. And they felt that we have to make it clear that Israel was attacked and not Israel is attacking.
In spite of Dayan's opposition, at 0900 hours, the cabinet decided on immediate mobilization of Israeli reserves. Meanwhile, on this holiest of holy days, Israeli soldiers on the front lines fasted and prayed. But their calm was to be interrupted with news of the upcoming war. Ironically, across the canal, Egyptian troops were given their first warning of war at exactly the same time. They were to break their Ramadan fast and prepare for battle. But the attack would come earlier than the Israelis had been led to believe.
جمعنا قائد كتيبة حتى قال لنا ايه افطروا فضحكنا راح هو موزع الشاي وتمر وفطرنا لما فطرنا بدأنا ايه الرهبة تجيلنا يعني ما فيش حد ما بيخافش قال لنا النهارده بقى الساعة 2 ان شاء الله يا ناخد طرنا يا نروح ملناش لازمة.
توجيهات رئيس الأركان فريق سعد الدين الشاذلي كان بيصدر لنا توجيهات رئيس الأركان، كان الوثيقة اللي هامة لكل ضابط وكل جندي، بيعرفك انت فين، هتعبر منين، القارب ورقمه، مين يمينك مين شمالك، الشدة اللي عليك ايه هي. الكلام ده كله كان حاجة رائعة.
In an operation they had rehearsed many times over the past 6 years, 5 Egyptian infantry divisions would storm across the Suez Canal. Codenamed Dovecot, the Israeli defense plan was based on the 15 strongpoints of the Bar-Lev line. Manned by just 450 men, these forts would be supported by bringing 100 tanks of the Sinai Armored Division into position on the waterline. Enough, it was thought, to foil any Egyptian attempt to cross the canal. Dovecot would be triggered 2 hours before the start of the battle, and that would be at 6 p.m. They knew that from Ashraf Marwan, the source.
It had an effect, yes. It led primarily to a situation where there were no tanks in the positions in the Egyptian front because the commander of the Southern Command gave an order not to move any tank to the positions before 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He was certain, like everyone else, that war will start at 6.
In 2002, I unmasked Ashraf Marwan, and when I did it, it was Ashraf Marwan, the Egyptian national hero, because in my view, he was a double agent, and in fact, he was the jewel in the crown of the Egyptian deception plan before 1973.
October 6th, 1400 hours, war. "220 jets of the Egyptian Air Force crossed the Suez Canal, heading for Sinai. Their targets? Israel's command centers, airfields, and anti-aircraft batteries.
وانا ارتفاع على 5 كيلو فوق بقى شايف حضرتك باصص في سينا انفجار هنا انفجار هنا صواريخ بتضرب بتاعت الاسرائيليين ضد الطيارات بتاعتنا والطيارات بتاعتنا بتضرب موقع الصواريخ. يعني حاجه عارف حضرتك فرح بلدي يعني الكهارب اللي هم بيعلقوا الكهارب وبتنور وتطفئ حاجه جميله يعني حاجه سينا بقى عماله بتزغرط.
The Egyptian aircraft returned to their airfields after destroying their targets for the loss of just 8 planes. But one of their first casualties was significant. President Sadat's brother.
عاطف سادات دفعتي. عاطف سادات بقى ما حد تحس انه اخو رئيس جمهوريه ولا حاجه. بقيت لي كده ده حسين فهمي كده قلم دول الشعر الاصفر عن الخضراء ومنتهى الشياكه ومنتهى الرجوله وكان الاول علينا طيرانا وعلما بكفاءه مش عشان يعني
Within minutes of the first aerial attacks, a massive artillery barrage begins. "20 minutes after 0 hour, under cover of the continuing artillery fire, the first wave of Egyptian ground troops crossed the canal. 4,000 men and 720 rafts.
ما شاء الله لقينا نفسينا على الشط التاني. تعال بقى تخيل هنطلع الستر الترابي. الستر الترابي ارتفاعه 20 متر. اتخيل انت واحد هيطلع تبة 3 متر او 4 متر، لا دول 20. طالعين العساكر حاجة زي الفراشة بتجري.
With the war half an hour old, Dovecot, the Israeli defense plan, is rushed into action. Tanks begin their move towards the canal from where they've been dug in, 5 kilometers to the east.
When the Egyptian infantry first got across the canal, they kind of knew how the Israelis would respond. They had the new 83 Saga anti-tank missile. These infantry portable missile systems, they were certainly new to the theatre, and they proved very effective against the Israeli armour.
كان عندي مالين الأسئلة هل هو صاروخ للقوة التدميرية ديت لكن مع أول صاروخ مع أول دبابة دي كانت المشكلة الأولى والأخيرة بالنسبة لي.
في درس جديد طلع في الحرب طلعوا المقاتل المصري عموما سواء فرد الصاعقة وفرد المنشاة، لأن الفرد تستطيع يخرج الدبابة، يعني الدبابة المهولة دي كلها يستطيع الفرد الواحد لوحده انه يدمر الدبابة دي، وده الدرس الرئيسي في حرب اكتوبر اللي بتدرس في الدنيا.
Three hours into the war, 45 Egyptian infantry battalions formed of 32,000 men have crossed the canal. The forts of the Bar-Lev line had been taken or besieged. Most of the Israeli tanks had been destroyed. Dovecot has failed.
בסוף היום, זאת אומרת, בלילה, אני במקום שאני נמצא, אנחנו שני טנקים והנגמה שלי, ואז מודיעים לי שיש חטיבה בדרך אליי, ואותו מח"ט, גבי אמיר, פגשתי אותו, והוא מבקש שאני אתאר לו איפה הגדוד. ואני אומר לו, זה הגדוד. עכשיו שאני צוחק, הוא מכיר אותי שאני צוחק לפעמים. אמרתי, לא גבי, זה הגדוד.
After the first wave of Egyptian infantry has made the canal crossing, 35 battalions of engineers follow.
عدت المهندسين في الموجة الثانية ومسكوا الطرمبات وركبوها والخراطيم وابتدوا فعلا يوجهوا الخراطيم إلى ساتر الترابي، وابتدت أتربة تنزل، وابتدى النجاح الكبير في هذه التجربة، لأن مكننا بعد ما فتحت الثغرة في ساتر الترابي إن احنا ننزل معدات ونشغلها ونعدي بعض المعدات، وخاصة المدفعيات بتاعت الكتايب والأسلحة اللي لازمة لصد الهجمات المضادة المحتملة للعدو على الشاطئ الشرقي.
The next phase of the engineers' work was to erect pontoon bridges for the tanks and heavy weapons. By sunrise on day 2, it looked as if the war had been an unequivocal success for Egypt's armed forces. 100,000 men, more than 1,000 tanks, and over 10,000 other vehicles had crossed the Suez Canal with only minimal losses.
The Egyptian army came away from the 1967 Arab-Israeli War ashamed of itself. And in 1973, the Egyptian army proved that it was capable of military success and military victory. That was very important to the Egyptians as a fighting force because it proved to them that they themselves could succeed.